December 1943. The Adriatic is not blue. It is a grey paste of lead and salt water that merges with the sky in an indistinct horizon of absolute misery. If you look at the map, Italy seems like a boot ready to kick the underbelly of Europe, and the strategists in London and Washington called this the soft underbelly of the Axis. What a macabre joke. There is nothing soft here, only mud. Mud that sucks a man's boots to his ankles. A clay-like, cold, living mud that swallows whole supply mules, that jams the bolts of Lee Enfield rifles and rots the skin between a soldier's toes before he even feels the cold. We are on the east coast of Italy, trudging painfully towards a medieval town perched on a rocky promontory that juts out over the sea like a broken tooth. The town's name is Ortona. For the men of the 1st Canadian Infantry Division, boys who grew up on the prairies of Alberta, the docks of Halifax or the forests of British Columbia, this name means nothing. Yet. They are volunteers, citizen soldiers. Sergeant William Bill McAllister of the Loyal Edmonton Regiment writes a letter to his wife in Red Deer, trying to describe the landscape without mentioning the sweetish smell of bloated horse corpses dotting the Via Adriatica. He tells her the weather is damp, a ludicrous British understatement for the hydrological hell they've been living in for weeks. McAllister is 24, but his eyes, sunk in dark orbits of chronic exhaustion, belong to a man of 50. He doesn't know, no one knows, that in less than 48 hours the war of movement, the war of maneuver they trained for on open plains, will end. Ortona is not just a town, it is an architectural death trap designed by the devil and perfected by German military engineering. On the other side, entrenched in the limestone cellars, on the upper floors of 300-year-old buildings, and in the bell towers of churches are not terrified conscripts or second-rate garrison troops. They are the men of the 1st Parachute Division, the Fallschirmjäger, Hitler's elite, men who descended from the skies over Crete, veterans hardened by the Eastern Front, soldiers who consider surrender a biologically impossible character flaw. Their commander, General Lieutenant Richard Heydrich, looked at Ortona and saw not houses, schools, or churches. He saw fortifications. He saw kill zones. He saw an opportunity to bleed the Allies until the Adriatic turned red. The order from Berlin is clear, brutal, and unambiguous. Fight for every last house and tree. There will be no tactical withdrawal. Ortona must be held, and if it cannot be held, it must be turned into the grave of whoever tries to take it. The tragic irony begins here, in the discrepancy between expectation and reality. The Allied High Command, sitting in heated tents miles to the rear, sees Ortona as a dot on the map, a minor obstacle on the way to Rome. They expect the Germans to do the sensible thing, fall back to the next defensive line to the north. They do not understand the psychology of fanaticism or the desperation of an empire watching its borders shrink. They are sending the Canadians into an urban meat grinder, unprecedented on the Western Front. What is about to happen in Ortona has no parallel in the experiences of Western armies thus far. It is not the Desert War. It is not the invasion of Sicily. It is Stalingrad in miniature. It is a battle where the combat distance is measured not in kilometers or meters, but in centimeters, in the thickness of a brick wall, in the time it takes for a grenade pin to fly from one room to another. Let's go down to ground level, to the perspective of Private James Jim Thompson, a rifleman with the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada. He is 19, and the mud on his uniform has hardened into a crust that feels like medieval armor. He is looking at the town from a distance through the constant drizzle. Ortona seems compact, dense, narrow streets, tall stone buildings packed together, wrought iron balconies. It looks picturesque. It looks like a place where, in another world, he might have spent a holiday. But his stomach is tied in a cold knot of premonition. There is an unnatural silence hanging over the terracotta roofs. No smoke from chimneys, no movement of civilians. The town is holding its breath. Jim checks his equipment for the 10th time. Ammunition, Mills bombs, canteen, the bayonet. He touches the letter from his mother in his breast pocket, a paper talisman he hopes will stop bullets. The naivety of youth is being eaten away by the acid of fear, but duty keeps him in line. Beside him, Corporal Arthur Art Miller lights a cheap cigarette, cupping the flame with his hands, the orange glow illuminating a face marked by acne scars and cynicism. "They'll run," Miller says, trying to convince himself as much as the men. "The Jerrys know when the game is up, they'll blow a few bridges and pull back." Miller is wrong, mortally wrong. Inside Ortona, Obergefreiter Hans Weber, a 22-year-old German paratrooper, is finishing the preparation of a surprise at the entrance of a residential building on the Corso Vittorio Emanuele. He is not planning to run. He is tying a nearly invisible tripwire to a telemine, a metal disc filled with enough explosives to rip the track off a tank or vaporize a squad of infantry. Weber works with the precision of a watchmaker. He places the mine under a loose floorboard, covers it with rubble and plaster dust. He smiles, but there is no humor in his eyes, only an icy determination. They have turned the city into a lethal puzzle. S-mines, bouncing betties, buried in gardens ready to jump to groin height and detonate, spreading hundreds of steel ball bearings. Demolition charges placed in the support pillars of the larger buildings, ready to bring down tons of stone on the attackers. MG-42 machine guns, the infamous Hitler's saws, positioned not in the windows where they would be obvious targets, but set back in the shadows of the rooms, firing through discreet holes in the walls, creating corridors of crossfire that cover every inch of exposed asphalt. The Germans have blocked the cross streets with rubble from houses they blew up themselves, channeling the Canadian advance into predetermined killing fields. They know every alley, every cellar, every rooftop shortcut. They are not guests in Ortona. They are the city's immune system, and the Canadians are the virus they intend to eradicate. The final approach begins. It is the morning of December 20th. The air smells of cordite and ozone. Canadian artillery opens the prelude, a deafening bombardment that makes the ground tremble like gelatin. The explosions raise geysers of black earth and pulverized masonry. It looks like the end of the world, but for the German paratroopers in their deep shelters, it's just the wake-up call. They shake the dust from their camouflage smocks, check their weapons, and wait. When the bombardment ceases, the silence returns, heavier than before. The Sherman tanks of the Three Rivers Regiment, their engines roaring and tracks grinding, begin to advance, providing cover for the infantry of the loyal Edmontons. They move up the main road towards the town square. The illusion of progress is seductive. The first 100 meters are easy, too easy. Sergeant McAllister signals for his men to spread out. They walk tensed, rifles at the ready, eyes scanning the dark windows above. "Keep your spacing," he shouts, his voice sounding strangely thin in the damp air. Suddenly the world disintegrates. The characteristic sound of the MG-42, not a staccato, but a continuous tearing, like fabric being violently ripped, erupts from a ground-floor shoe shop on the right. Tracer rounds cut through the air, green and furious. 2 men from the lead section fall before they even hear the sound of the shots, their bodies jerking violently as the high-velocity lead pulverizes bone and organs. The chaos is instantaneous. "Sniper! Top window, left!" someone screams, and the dry crack of a Kar 98K rifle answers, silencing the cry. A Canadian soldier tries to run for the cover of a doorway, but his foot snags a tripwire. The explosion of the booby trap is contained, muffled but devastating, turning the doorway into a cloud of pink dust and wood splinters. The Shermans try to turn their turrets to engage the targets, but the streets are too narrow, the angles too steep. A Panzerfaust, the Germans' anti-tank iron fist, hisses from a rooftop. The hollow charge projectile strikes the side armor of the lead tank. There's a flash of blinding white light, followed by a metallic clang and the horrific scream of superheated metal. The crew tries to escape the hatch as flames and oily black smoke engulf the vehicle. It's a choreographed carnage. The Canadians fall back, dragging their wounded, leaving dark trails of blood on the ancient cobblestones. They seek cover behind walls, in craters, wherever they can hide from the rain of steel. Sergeant McAllister, his face covered in soot and blood that is not his, realizes the terrible truth. The street is death. The street is where the enemy wants them to be. "Get off the street! Get into the houses!" he roars, kicking a heavy oak door until the lock gives way. They pour into the first building, panting, terrified, adrenalized. But entering the house is not safety. It is just the start of a new kind of horror. The interior is dark, filled with shadows and overturned furniture. The smell of interrupted civilian lives, spoiled food, old clothes, mildew, mixes with the smell of war. They clear the ground floor, room by room. Nerves roar, expecting every closet to hide a German or a bomb. They move up the stairs, step by step, weapons pointed upwards. On the first floor they find a dead Italian family, caught in the crossfire days earlier, their stiff bodies seated around a table, a grotesque parody of a meal. There is no time for grief. They must secure the building. They reach the top floor and look out the back window. The courtyard below is another maze of walls and fences, and in the house next door, just 3 meters away, they see movement. A German helmet. Eye contact is made. For a fraction of a second, the humanity on both sides locks. Then conditioned reflex takes over. The Canadian fires his Thompson, the German his MP40. Glass shatters. Plaster explodes. The distance is so short, they can see the fear in each other's eyes. This is the nature of the battle for Ortona. There are no front lines. The front line is the ceiling above your head, the floor beneath your feet, the wall beside you. The enemy could be in the next room, listening to you breathe. The battle ceases to be a coordinated military operation and fragments into hundreds of private, brutal, savage duels. Squad against squad, man against man, knife, bayonet, rifle butt, bare hands. The concept of strategy dissolves. Only immediate survival remains. Captain Paul Triquet of the Royal 20 Suez Regiment, the famous Van Doos supporting the flank, watches the agonizing progress through his binoculars. He sees smoke rising from dozens of points in the city. He sees the pattern. Every time his men try to advance up the street, they are massacred. Every time they try to take a house from the front, they face a storm of fire. "We are fighting their fight," he mutters to his radio operator. "We have to change the rules." But changing the rules mid-game under enemy fire is a Herculean task. Night falls early in December, bringing with it a bone-chilling cold and an absolute darkness, broken only by the flashes of explosions and the flares that drift slowly down on parachutes, bathing the city in a flickering ghostly light. The night brings no rest. On the contrary, it brings the German ghost patrols, hunter-killer teams that move silently through the rubble, wearing felt-soled shoes to muffle their steps, slitting the throats of tired sentries, tossing grenades into windows where they saw the ember of a cigarette. The psychological terror is as potent as the physical. The Canadians cannot sleep. Every creak of wood, every moving shadow could be death. Exhaustion begins to take its toll, hallucinations, paranoia, men firing at shadows. Sergeant McAllister tries to keep his men focused. He checks the positions, distributing words of encouragement that sound hollow even to him. "Hold on, lads. We'll push them out tomorrow." But he knows that tomorrow will just be more of the same, or worse. In the cellars of the German-occupied buildings, the mood is different. There is an arrogant confidence, but also a growing surprise. The German commanders, in their nightly reports to Division HQ, note something unexpected. They expected the Canadians, colonial troops in the view of Nazi ideology, to break after the first bloody shock. They expected disordered retreats. But these men from Alberta and British Columbia are not retreating. They are dying, yes, in horrific numbers, but they keep coming. They are stubborn. There is a ferocity in them that the veterans of Russia recognize and grudgingly respect. An intercepted report from a German lieutenant reads, "The enemy fights with the obstinacy of a cornered animal. They lack our tactical finesse, but compensate with a raw aggression. Each house must be demolished to get them out." December 21st dawns with rain. Always the rain. The city of Ortona is being systematically dismantled. The artillery of both sides is turning historic landmarks into piles of rubble that block the streets even further, creating an alien landscape of craters and mountains of broken stone. The Canadian tanks now act as mobile artillery, blasting the facades of buildings at point-blank range to expose the defenders. But the Germans adapt. They fall back into the interior of the buildings when the tanks fire and move back to the windows as soon as the dust settles. It is a cat-and-mouse game played with high explosives. It is on this second day that the true nature of the stalemate crystallizes. Conventional infantry tactics, fire and movement, flanking, are useless here. You cannot flank a position when every flank is another fortified position. You cannot use suppressive fire when the enemy is behind a meter of solid stone. The Canadians are bleeding for every yard of progress. The casualties in the loyal Edmonton Regiment are reaching critical levels. Platoons that started with 30 men are now down to 10. Sergeants are commanding platoons. Corporals are commanding companies. The chain of command is being eroded by the rate of attrition. Private Jim Thompson, the young Seaforth, is crouched behind an overturned counter in a destroyed bakery. The air is thick with old flour dust mixed with lime. He is shaking, not from cold, but from a post-combat adrenaline reaction. He has just killed a man at close range, a German boy who looked no older than himself, who emerged from a trapdoor in the floor. The image of the German's face, the surprise, the blood bubbling from his mouth, is seared onto Jim's retina. He looks at his hands. They are black with dirt and gunpowder. He feels old. He feels dirty in a way that water will never wash clean. "Jim, ammo!" someone yells. He throws a bandolier. The movement is mechanical. He has become a war machine, a cog in the meat grinder. Humanity is a luxury he cannot afford right now. In the streets outside, the battle evolves into something primitive. The sound is the worst part. The noise in a confined urban environment is amplified. Explosions don't dissipate. They reverberate, bouncing off walls and coming back. A physical cacophony that makes your teeth ache and your ears bleed. Orders have to be screamed inches from each other's faces to be heard. And there is the smell. Ortona's smell is changing. The smell of death is getting stronger, mixed with the smell of sewage from ruptured pipes and the acrid chemical scent of explosives. It is the perfume of the apocalypse. The Germans start using even crueler tactics. They leave poisoned or booby-trapped bottles of wine on tables, knowing thirsty soldiers might be tempted. They place explosives behind crooked pictures on the walls, knowing the human impulse to straighten them will be fatal. They turn curiosity and basic needs into vectors of death. Colonel Hofmeister, commander of the Seaforths, realizes that if they continue like this, there will be no regiment left to celebrate Christmas in a few days. He calls an emergency meeting with his officers in a damp cellar serving as a forward command post. The map on the table is stained with coffee and what looks like dried blood. "We cannot take the streets," he says, his voice hoarse from shouting and smoking. "The streets are suicide. If we want to take this city, we have to stop thinking like open-field soldiers and start thinking like rats." It is here that the seed of tactical innovation is planted. The idea of mouse-holing is not new in military theory, but it has never been applied on this scale with this desperate necessity. The logic is brutally simple. If the street is the kill zone, don't use the street. If the door is a death trap, don't use the door. Create your own door. Go through the walls. Move from house to house, room to room, without ever exposing yourself to the outside. But to do this, they need tools. They need explosives. They need pickaxes. And they need an insane courage to detonate a demolition charge in a small room and charge through the smoke and rubble before the enemy on the other side recovers. The orders go down to the front lines. "Forget the streets. We're going through the walls." The adaptation begins. The pioneers, combat engineers, come to the front, carrying packs full of beehive charges, shaped charges designed to pierce concrete and steel. Sergeant McAllister gathers what's left of his platoon. "All right, listen up. Change of plans. We're going to visit the neighbors, but we're not knocking." He points to the wall of the living room where they are sheltered. "We're going to blow this and go into the next house." The men look at him, tired, skeptical, but obedient. They set the charge. "Fire in the hole!" The cry echoes. The explosion is concussive, sucking the air from the room for an instant and then filling it with choking dust and brick shrapnel. But when the dust settles, there is a jagged, smoking hole in the wall. Through it, they can see the dining room of the adjacent house, and the Germans inside, stunned by the sudden blast coming from where a solid wall should be. The Canadians charge through the breach, guns spitting fire, grenades flying. The violence is intimate, chaotic, and swift. They clear the room, then the hallway, then the kitchen. They have taken the house without setting foot on the pavement. It works. The tactic works. but the psychological cost of fighting inside houses is immense. You never know what's on the other side of the wall. It could be an empty room. It could be a machine gun nest. It could be an Italian family cowering in the corner, praying. The moral ambiguity and the constant danger wear nerves to the breaking point. As the Canadians begin to chew their way through the heart of Ortona, the German commanders react with disbelief and fury. Heydrich receives the reports. The Canadians have vanished from the streets. They are moving like termites through the structure of the city, unseen, relentless. The defensive advantage of the intersecting streets and prepared fire zones is being nullified. The Germans realize they will have to join the game. They will have to counterattack inside the houses, fight room by room, contest every staircase, every attic. The battle descends to a level of medieval savagery with modern weapons. Ortona becomes a three-dimensional hive of death. In a diary found decades later in the pocket of a German uniform in a museum, a soldier named Klaus wrote, "The Canadians are not human. They are devils of dust and noise. They come through the walls. There is no safe place. Not even the center of a stone building protects us. They blow up everything. We are fighting ghosts who bring hell with them." The battle intensifies. In the Seaforth sector, Private Jim Thompson is now covered in a fine layer of red brick dust that makes him look like a living statue. He's on the second floor of a house, looking through a newly made mouse hole. On the other side, a dark hallway. He tosses a grenade, counts 2 seconds and hurls himself through the breach right after the detonation. He lands on rubble and glass. He hears a groan. A wounded German is trying to reach for his Luger. Jim doesn't hesitate. 1 shot. The groaning stops. He leans against the wall, breathing hard, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looks around. It's a child's bedroom. There's a broken doll on the floor, its porcelain head crushed under a military boot. The contrast between the innocence of the setting and the brutality of the act he has just committed is a punch to the gut. But there is no time for philosophy. "Next wall," the corporal shouts, and they continue, house by house, wall by wall. The advance is measured in yards but paid for in gallons of blood. The German resistance stiffens. They begin to notice the pattern and set their own counter-traps. They wait for the Canadians to blow a wall, and the moment the breach is opened, they toss grenades back or fire flamethrowers through the hole. Liquid fire floods the room, incinerating men where they stand, turning the refuge into an instant crematorium. The screams of burning men echo through the empty corridors, a sound that will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. It's a war of nerves, of reflexes, and of sheer luck. There is no glory here, no flags waving in the wind. Just the filth, the fear, the deafening noise, and the sudden violent death that can come from any direction, at any moment. Ortona is being consumed from the inside out. The city is dying, and its stone bones are being ground up to cover the bodies of the young men fighting for its possession. And this is only the beginning. The darkest days, the bloodiest Christmas Eve in the history of the Canadian Army are yet to come. Little Stalingrad is just opening its jaws to swallow more souls. As the night of the 22nd falls, a winter storm moves in from the sea, promising more misery, more cold, more mud. But inside the ruins, the heat is intense, generated by uncontrolled fires, and the fury of thousands of men locked in a mortal embrace. Captain Triquet looks at his maps, marking the tiny progress with a red grease pencil. He knows that victory, if it comes, will be Pyrrhic. He knows his men are being changed, warped by this experience. They will not go home as the boys who left, if they go home at all. The transformation of Ortona into a slaughterhouse is complete, and in the shadows of the cellars, the real rats, the rodents, begin to emerge, drawn by the abundance of fresh meat the war has served them. The ultimate irony: while men mimic rats to fight, the rats watch the men die, waiting their turn at the feast. December 23, 1943. Ortona is no longer a city on a map. It is an autopsy of civilization performed with high explosives. The sun rises, but the light is weak, filtered through a permanent shroud of grey smoke and pulverized plaster that hangs over the streets like a funeral veil. To breathe in Ortona now is to inhale the city itself. The dust of centuries-old mortar, the soot of burning furniture, and the copper tang of blood that hasn't had time to dry in the damp winter air. The transformation is absolute. The mouse-holing tactic has turned the battle into a subterranean nightmare, a war fought in the intestines of the buildings. The Canadians are no longer moving through the city. They are moving inside it, parasitic organisms consuming the host to kill the infection within. On the German side, the mood has shifted from professional confidence to a grim, apocalyptic fatalism. General Lieutenant Richard Heydrich, commanding the 1st Parachute Division, receives reports that defy conventional military logic. He is a man who understands geometry, angles of fire, the science of defense. But what is happening in the sector held by the 3rd Parachute Regiment is not science. It is chaos theory weaponized. His men, the best Germany has to offer, are being outflanked not by movement around them, but by movement through walls they believed were solid protection. A frantic radio transmission from a platoon leader in the San Tommaso district captures the horror. They are blasting through the partition walls. We hold the stairs, they take the kitchen. We hold the hallway, they come through the ceiling. We need more explosives. We need flamethrowers. Send everything. The everything Heydrich sends includes the Goliath-tracked mines, remote-controlled beetles of doom packed with 60 kilograms of explosives. They are clumsy, wire-guided machines, technological terrors designed to crush morale. One of them clatters down the Corso Vittorio Emanuele, its electric motor whining like a demented sewing machine. Private Jim Thompson, peering through a shattered shutter on the 2nd floor of a haberdashery, sees it coming. It looks like a toy tank, absurd and terrifying. "What the hell is that?" he whispers. Beside him, Corporal Miller doesn't hesitate. "Shoot the tracks! Shoot it!" Their Lee Enfields crack. Sparks fly from the Goliath's armor. It spins wildly, the control wire severed by a lucky bullet or shrapnel, and slams into a pile of rubble, detonating with a force that cracks the facade of the building opposite and sends a shockwave through the ground that rattles Thompson's teeth. The explosion is a reminder. The Germans have not run out of tricks. They are just getting started. But the Canadians are learning fast. They are adapting with a terrifying fluidity. The loyal Edmonton Regiment and the Seaforth Highlanders have effectively ceased to operate as regular infantry battalions. They have dissolved into small, autonomous, hunter-killer teams. The officer class is thinning out. The war is now being led by sergeants and corporals, men who live in the dust, who know the smell of a German cigarette from 20 feet away. Sergeant Bill McAllister has stopped thinking about red deer. He has stopped thinking about the future. His world has shrunk to the room he is in, and the wall he has to breach next. He looks at his hands. They are raw, the knuckles bleeding, covered in a paste of grime. He is holding a mouse-holing charge, 2 anti-tank mines wired together. It's an improvised device, unstable and incredibly powerful. "Ready?" he asks. His voice is flat, devoid of emotion. 2 of his men, Privates Smitty Smith and Frenchy LeBlanc, nod. They are huddled in a pantry, surrounded by jars of pickled olives shattered by bullets. McAllister sets the timer. 5 seconds. Fire! They scramble back into the adjacent hallway, diving behind a heavy oak sideboard. The explosion is a physical blow, a hammer to the chest. The door is blown off its hinges, flying past them like a missile. Dust billows out, thick and choking. Before it settles, they are moving. They rush through the jagged hole, Thompson's submachine guns sweeping the room. Inside, 2 German paratroopers are staggering, concussed, blood running from their ears. There is no shout to surrender. There is no hesitation. The Thompsons bark, short, controlled bursts. The Germans fall. It is brutal. It is intimate. It is over in 3 seconds. This is the rhythm of the 23rd. Breach, blast, clear, repeat. But the Germans are escalating. They begin to rig entire rooms as traps. They leave a window open, inviting a sniper to take a position. But the floorboards beneath the window are sawed through, covering a pit filled with sharpened stakes or a mine. They retreat to the top floors, blow the staircases, and wait for the Canadians to enter the ground floor before dropping grenades through holes drilled in the ceiling. It is 3-dimensional chess, played with high explosives. The Canadian response is equally ruthless. If they can't take the upper floors, They blow the support pillars in the basement and bring the whole building down. Ortona is being erased, one structure at a time. The epicenter of the slaughter is moving towards the Piazza San Tommaso. The cathedral stands there, its dome battered but still standing, a silent witness to the desecration. The fighting here is fiercest because the streets narrow into a medieval tangle where tanks cannot maneuver. It is pure infantry hell. Captain Paul Triquet of the Royal 22N, Van Doos, is pushing his men hard on the flank towards the Casa Berardi, a vital strongpoint just outside the town proper that controls the supply routes. The Casa is a fortress. The Germans have turned this farmhouse into a bastion bristling with machine guns and mortars. Triquet knows that taking it is suicide, but leaving it is defeat. "We go," he tells his men. "There is no coming back until we take it." His leadership is the only thing holding them together. As they advance through the olive groves, the German MG-42s open up, a scythe of lead cutting through the trees. Men fall, screaming for medics who are themselves pinned down. Triquet stands up. In the middle of the storm, he stands up. "Come on. They can't kill us all." It is a lie, and they all know it. But it is the kind of lie that wins Victoria Crosses. They follow him. They storm the Casa Berardi, fighting room by room, bayonets against spades, desperation against fanaticism. They take the house. But the cost is catastrophic. The Van Doos are decimated. Back in the town, night falls on the 23rd, but the darkness is deceptive. The sky is lit by the burning husks of buildings and the constant arc of tracers. The smell of roasting meat is unmistakable now, some of it from dead mules, some from the stores of pork in the cellars, and some... The men try not to think about the other source. In a basement near the piazza, a group of Seaforths tries to rest. They are exhausted to the point of hallucination. One soldier, a boy named David from Vancouver, starts talking to his empty helmet, convinced it's his father. "I did the chores, Dad. I fixed the fence." His eyes are wide, staring at nothing. PTSD is not a term they know. They call it bomb-happy or battle fatigue. His sergeant, a hardened veteran named Red O'Connor, puts a hand on his shoulder. "Easy, Dave. Sleep now." But there is no sleep. The German artillery begins a harassment bombardment, dropping shells at irregular intervals just to keep nerves frayed. Every whistle of an incoming shell stops hearts. Every explosion shakes the dust from the ceiling beams, coating the men in another layer of the city they are destroying. December 24th, Christmas Eve. The irony is so heavy, it feels like a physical weight on the shoulders of every man in Ortona. The Christian world prepares to celebrate the Prince of Peace, while here, in this corner of Italy, men are preparing to commit the greatest sacrilege imaginable. The padre of the Seaforth Highlanders, Captain Roy Durnford, moves through the ruins, a spectral figure in a dirty surplice over his battle dress. He is trying to organize a service, something, anything, to remind these men of their humanity. But the war does not pause for liturgy. The fighting on the 24th intensifies. The Germans know the date. They know the psychological impact of dying on Christmas Eve. They launch a counterattack at dawn. It begins with a barrage of Nebelwerfers, the screaming Mimis. The six-barreled rocket launchers emit a terrifying moaning shriek as they fire, a sound that shreds the nerves before the explosives shred the flesh. The rockets land in the Canadian forward positions, saturating the area with high explosives and smoke. Then the Fallschirmjäger come. They emerge from the smoke like grey wraiths, firing from the hip, throwing potato masher grenades. They are trying to retake a row of houses on the Via Constantinopoli. The fighting is hand-to-hand, savage and confused. In the kitchen of a ruined villa, Private Thompson finds himself wrestling with a German soldier. They roll on the floor, knocking over a table, smashing crockery. The German is strong, smelling of sweat and raw onions. He has his hands around Thompson's throat, squeezing, thumbs digging into the windpipe. Thompson's vision blurs. Black spots dance before his eyes. His hand flails, finds a heavy cast-iron skillet on the floor. He swings it with the last ounce of his strength. The dull thud of iron on bone is sickening. The grip loosens. Thompson scrambles back, gasping for air, retching. He grabs his rifle and finishes it. He sits there, panting, staring at the body. "Merry Christmas," he whispers, tears streaking the grime on his face. He doesn't know why he's crying, he just knows that something inside him has broken forever. But the most surreal, the most grotesque event of Christmas Eve is yet to happen. It is known as the Christmas dinner. The Seaforth Highlanders quartermaster, intent on maintaining morale, has managed to bring up supplies for a traditional dinner. Roast pork, applesauce, cauliflower, even a bottle of beer for each man. They set up the dining hall in the church of Santa Maria di Costantinopoli, the only building in their sector with a roof still partially intact. The tables are laid with white tablecloths, sheets scavenged from bombed-out houses. An organist plays carols on the church organ, the notes struggling to be heard over the roar of the battle just a few blocks away. The system is rotational. One company comes in, eats, and goes back to the fighting. The next company comes in. As Company A sits down, dirt-caked, eyes hollow, the contrast is heartbreaking. They eat voraciously, shoving food into their mouths with trembling hands, trying to ignore the sound of machine gun fire outside. The padre says a grace that is short and poignant. Lord, protect these men. Bring them peace. As they eat, a runner bursts in. Company B needs support. They're hitting the flank. Men drop their forks, grab their rifles and run out the door, some with mouths still full of Christmas dinner. They run from the sanctuary of the church directly into the inferno. Many of them are dead within minutes of their last meal. The tablecloths are not stained with wine, but with the muddy boot prints of men who will not see Boxing Day. While the Seaforths have their surreal dinner, the loyal Edmontons are facing a crisis. They have pushed too far into a salient near the Piazza Municipale. A platoon commanded by Lieutenant Buck Simmons is cut off in a 3-story building. The Germans have surrounded them. They are firing Panzerfausts into the ground floor, trying to collapse the building. Simmons is screaming into the radio. "We are surrounded, taking heavy fire. Need support immediately." But support cannot reach them. The streets are blocked by burning tanks and rubble. They are on their own. Inside the building, the situation is desperate. The ammunition is running low. The wounded are groaning in the corner. Corporal Miller, who was joking about the Germans running away just days ago, is now grimly silent, feeding belts into a Bren gun positioned at a window. He sees a German team setting up a flamethrower across the street. "Flamethrower! Get down!" he yells. A jet of liquid fire erupts, hitting the window frame. The heat is instantaneous and intense. The curtains catch fire. The room fills with black smoke. Miller keeps firing blindly through the flames, screaming in defiance and terror. He cuts down the flamethrower operator, the tank on the German's back exploding in a fireball that consumes his squad. But the reprieve is temporary. The Germans are bringing up a Sturmgeschütz assault gun. Its low profile makes it hard to hit. Its 75mm gun is pointed directly at their front door. Simmons makes a decision. "We're mouse-holing out the back. Now." They rig their last charges on the rear wall. The explosion is deafening in the confined space. They scramble through the hole into a narrow alleyway, carrying their wounded. But the alley is a trap. An MG-42 is positioned at the far end. As the first man exits, he is cut in half. "Back! Back inside!" Simmons screams. They are trapped. The building is burning. The enemy is at the door. It is the Alamo in an Italian townhouse. Simmons looks at his men. "Fix bayonets." It is an order from another century, an order of last resort. If they are going to die, they will die fighting. They wait in the smoke-filled hallway, listening to the German boots crunching on the glass outside. They grip their rifles until their knuckles are white. This is it, the end of the line. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocks the street outside. Then another, and another. The walls shake violently. Dust falls like snow. The sound of tank engines, Sherman engines, roars over the gunfire. A troop of tanks from the Three Rivers Regiment has smashed through the rubble barricade, literally driving over the ruins of a house to flank the Germans. Their 75mm guns blast the Sturmgeschütz and the infantry surrounding the building. The cavalry has arrived not on white horses but in 30-ton steel monsters. The Germans scatter. Simmons and his men are saved, shivering, coughing, unable to believe they are still breathing. They stumble out into the street, greeting the tank crews like angels. But there is no time for celebration. The battle rages on. As midnight approaches, marking the transition to Christmas Day, the violence reaches a crescendo. The Germans, frustrated by their failure to crush the Canadians, decide to destroy what's left of the town. They begin to detonate the major demolition charges they had planted days before. Entire blocks of buildings simply lift into the air and collapse in clouds of dust. The noise is continuous, a rolling thunder that drowns out thought. In the command bunker of the 1st Parachute Division, Heydrich stares at the map. He is losing ground, house by house, but he is making the Canadians pay a price that should be unbearable. He drafts a message to Kesselring. The enemy attacks with a disregard for casualties that suggests madness or desperation. We are holding, but the city is becoming uninhabitable for both sides. In the ruins, Sergeant McAllister sits in a corner of a cleared room, lighting a cigarette stub he found in his pocket. It is Christmas. He thinks of the tree in his living room in Red Deer, the smell of pine. The snow that is clean and white, not grey and bloody. He wonders if his wife is sleeping. He wonders if she knows. He takes a drag, the smoke harsh in his throat. Beside him, Private Smith is cleaning his bayonet, wiping off a dark, sticky substance. "Merry Christmas, Sarge," Smith says softly. McAllister looks at him, his eyes dead. "Yeah," he says. "Merry Christmas." Outside, a flare bursts, casting a sickly green light over the corpses piled in the street. The carols have stopped, the guns have not. The battle for Ortona has entered its most savage phase, and the spirit of Christmas has died in the rubble. December 26th, 1943. Boxing Day. In the rest of the British Empire, this is a day for family, for leftovers, for unwrapping the final gifts. In Ortona, the gift is survival, and the wrapping paper is dirty bandages soaked in sulfur drugs and plasma. The battle has crossed a psychological threshold. If Christmas Eve was a tragedy, Boxing Day is a massacre stripped of all sentimentality. The pretense of military operations has evaporated. This is now a gang war fought with heavy artillery. The city is no longer a collection of buildings. It is a jagged, broken spine of stone that the Canadians are trying to climb, vertebra by vertebra, while the Germans hammer them from above. The exhaustion is catatonic. Men are falling asleep while firing their weapons. They sleep standing up against walls that vibrate with mortar impacts. The stimulant of fear has burned out their adrenal glands, leaving behind a dull, grey numbness. Sergeant Bill McAllister looks at his platoon. They are unrecognizable. Their uniforms are stiff with dried mud and blood. Their faces are masks of soot, with eyes that stare through you, not at you. They are Ortona ghosts. They move with a sluggish, jerky coordination, driven only by muscle memory and the screaming instinct to stay alive for one more minute. McAllister checks his watch. It's 09 Cellar hours, but the sky is dark, choked with the smoke of 100 burning fires. "Move out," he croaks. The words are barely audible, but the men obey. They always obey. The tactic of mouse-holing has evolved into a horrific routine, but the Germans have learned to weaponize the very architecture of the mouse-holes. Obergefreiter Hans Weber, now commanding a ragged squad of 6 paratroopers, all that remains of his platoon, has set a new kind of trap on the Via Cavour. They have abandoned the ground floor and the first floor of a tall, narrow townhouse. They have retreated to the attic, but they haven't just left. They have surgically weakened the support beams of the floors below. They wait. They listen. They hear the muffled thump of the Canadian demolition charge breaching the cellar wall. They hear the coughing, the scuffling of boots, the whispers of clear right, clear left. Weber holds a grenade, the pin already pulled, his thumb white on the lever. He waits until he hears the Canadians on the weak floorboards. He doesn't throw the grenade at them. He drops it down a ventilation shaft they identified earlier. The explosion in the confined space below blows out the weakened supports. The floor collapses. The Canadians fall into the basement, a tangle of limbs and equipment, and then the ceiling comes down on top of them. It is not a battle. It is an industrial accident arranged by malice. This specific horror, the building collapse, becomes the defining trauma of the third phase of the battle. The rumor spreads like wildfire through the Canadian lines. The Jerrys are blowing the buildings with us inside. It's not just a rumor. It's a prophecy. On December 27th, the nightmare manifests in its absolute form. A platoon of the loyal Edmonton Regiment, led by a popular officer, moves into a large building that appears to have been abandoned. It's a trap of diabolical sophistication. The Germans have packed the basement with explosives, hundreds of kilograms of TNT and captured mines, and run the detonator wire to a position across the street. They wait until the Canadians are fully inside, securing the upper floors, feeling a momentary sense of victory. Then the world ends. The explosion is not a sound. It is a displacement of air so violent it ruptures the eardrums of men 2 blocks away. The building doesn't just fall, it disintegrates. It lifts off its foundation, hangs in the air for a fraction of a second like a magician's trick, and then implodes into a pile of dust and rubble 20 feet high. 23 men are buried alive instantly. The silence that follows is more terrible than the noise. Then come the screams. Muffled, distant screams rising from beneath tons of compacted masonry. The rescue efforts begin immediately, frantic and desperate. Men die with their bare hands, tearing their fingernails off, sobbing with rage and grief. "Dig, for Christ's sake, dig!" screams Major Jim Stone, the company commander. But the stone is heavy, and the Germans, watching from their perches, start dropping mortar shells on the rescue party. It is a level of cruelty that snaps something in the collective psyche of the Canadian troops. The rules of war, already frayed, are now incinerated. There is no more mercy, no more prisoners. If the Germans want to play demolition games, the Canadians will show them they are the masters of high explosives. The retaliation is planned with a cold, reptilian fury. The target is a building block further up the street, known to be a German headquarters and strongpoint. The Canadians don't attack it, they undermine it. Working silently, sweating in the freezing damp, engineers tunnel from a captured cellar into the foundation of the German-held building. They pack the void with ammonal, every box of explosives they can find, case after case, stacking it like firewood. It takes hours. They move with the precision of executioners. When the charge is blown, the result is Old Testament vengeance. The German building vanishes. It is erased from the skyline. An estimated 40 to 50 German paratroopers are vaporized or entombed. The dust cloud engulfs the entire sector. When it clears, there is nothing left but a crater and a mound of debris. The message is sent: we will bury you in the rubble of your own fortress. This tit-for-tat demolition war escalates the destruction of Ortona to total annihilation. The streets are now indistinguishable from the interiors of houses. The city is a single, continuous ruin. Private Jim Thompson is part of the security detail covering the engineers. He watches the German building implode and feels nothing. The satisfaction he expected isn't there. There is only a void. He sits on a crate of rations, cleaning his rifle mechanically. He finds himself humming a tune, a lullaby his mother used to sing. It's bizarre, inappropriate, insane. A medic walks by, stops, looks at him. "You okay, Seaforth?" Thompson looks up. His eyes are glass. "I'm fine," he says. "I'm just waiting for the roof to fall." He has accepted death. He is no longer fighting to go home. He is fighting because it is the only thing he knows how to do. The boy who landed in Sicily is dead. The thing that inhabits his body is a creature of Ortona. On the German side, the ferocity of the Canadian response shakes even the veterans. General Lieutenant Heydrich realizes that the soft underbelly has developed teeth of steel. His division is bleeding to death. The 3rd Parachute Regiment has battalions reduced to the size of companies. They are running out of ammunition. They are running out of food. But worst of all, they are running out of sleep. The Canadian rats never stop. They attack at night. They attack at dawn. They attack during lunch. The relentless pressure is cracking the vaunted discipline of the Fallschirmjäger. Obergefreiter Weber is huddled in the corner of a church sacristy, sharing a can of cold beef with his last surviving machine gunner. "They are crazy," the gunner whispers, his hands shaking so hard he spills the food. "They blew up the whole block. Who does that? Who fights like that?" Weber stares at the stained glass window, miraculously intact, depicting St. Thomas. "We taught them," Weber says grimly. "We taught them how to hate, and now they are excellent students." The battle shifts to the final German bastion, the castle, the Castello Aragonese perched on the cliff edge overlooking the sea. It is the anchor of the German line. If the castle falls, Ortona falls. The approach to the castle is a kill zone of open ground and narrow alleys. The Canadians bring up the tanks again. The Three Rivers Regiment Shermans, battered, scarred, with sandbags piled on their hulls to stop Panzerfausts, rumble forward. They are firing high explosive shells directly into the castle walls, chipping away at centuries of stone. The infantry advances under the cover of the tanks, using the rolling barrage of direct tank fire. It is a slow, grinding process. Every meter costs a life. Inside the town, the cleanup continues, the ferreting of the cellars. It is the most dangerous job of all. The Germans who are cut off don't surrender. They hide in the deep tunnels and cisterns, popping up behind Canadian lines to slit throats. The Canadians have to clear every dark hole with grenades and flamethrowers. Sergeant McAllister is leading a ferret team. He kicks open a cellar door. "Coming out!" he yells. No answer. He tosses a grenade. Boom! He goes in, Thompson ready. A shape lunges from the shadows, a German officer, Luger raised. McAllister fires instinctively. The officer falls. McAllister stands over him, panting. The German is young, blonde, dying. He looks at McAllister and whispers something in German. "Mutti, Mom." McAllister lowers his gun. He feels a sudden, overwhelming urge to vomit. He stumbles out of the cellar into the fresh air, or what passes for fresh air. He leans against a wall and dry heaves until his ribs ache. He is done. He knows it. His soul has reached its capacity for violence, but the war doesn't care about his soul. As December 27th bleeds into the 28th, the writing is on the wall for Heydrich. He has achieved his strategic objective. He has delayed the Allied advance. He has inflicted massive casualties. He has turned a minor town into a major headache for the Allied command, but he cannot hold indefinitely. To stay is to lose the division. He begins to plan the unthinkable, withdrawal. But it must be a fighting withdrawal. He cannot let the Canadians know they are leaving. He orders the rearguard to intensify their fire, to empty their magazines, to blow up every remaining stockpile of ammunition they can't carry. The crescendo of noise on the night of the 27th is not an attack. It is a curtain of sound designed to mask the sound of retreating boots. But the Canadians misinterpret the fury. They think it's the prelude to a massive counterattack. They dig in deeper. They bring up every spare gun. They prepare for the final stand. The tension in the Canadian lines is electric. They are waiting for the wave that will break them. They grip their cold rifles, staring into the darkness, seeing monsters in every shadow. They don't know that the monsters are packing their bags. They don't know that they have won. All they know is that the night is loud, the ground is shaking, and death is waiting for the sun to rise.